Welcome everybody to the RPC TAC meeting for May 23rd, 2024. I guess we'll just jump right into it. We've got a handful of things on the agenda today, a little bit less than usual, which is nice. And we've got a sort of good mix of people in the room and in person and on Zoom. And we'll just go through our introductions first. Then we'll tackle the minutes, and then NHDOT is here in force today to talk about the vulnerable road users safety assessment, and then we'll talk about our project selection criteria after that. So going through introductions, I'll start with myself. Dave Walker from RPC.
Scott Vogel.
Bob Diana from Greenland.
Bill Member from DOT,
Chris Cross, Newington.
Steph is a Brentwood.
Corey Spadalis, safety section, NHDOT.
I'm Amanda Zateka. I am also with NHDOT Highway Design Safety Section.
Peter Coffin, Kingston.
Costa Christos from Newton.
Watching Costas.
Lucy C. John, NHDOT.
Patrick, Hampshire DOT Highway Safety.
Mark Monroney, Hampshire DOT Safety.
Brad Nichols, Coast.
All right, thanks. Going to the people online. Joe.
Yeah, Joe Lynch, Son of Hampton.
Right, welcome. Eric.
Hi, Eric Eby, City of Portsmouth.
Thanks, Eric. Jack.
Hi, Jack Wade, New Hampshire DES.
All right. William.
William Selectwood from Atkinson.
All right, welcome. And lastly, Lee.
Hi, Lee Levine, Federal Highways.
All right, welcome. All right. Next on the agenda is the minutes of the April meeting.
I'll move, we accept the minutes as written.
All right.
Second.
Second, Brad. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so next up, we have NHDOT here to talk about our vulnerable road users safety assessment. And I'll move out of this spot, and Bill, you're gonna give the presentation.
Also, there's someone certain to have a safety.
Okay, so I will get.
Looks like we have 10 please. That's all mine for.
Tim Warren.
So this is part of an effort to try to bring in more outside speakers to kind of learn opportunities in TAC meetings, since we usually tend to spend a lot of time on the mechanics of particular documents that we need to develop and adopt. But want to have more chances for you to hear from folks around the state who are working in various aspects of the transportation system.
Right.
Did I ask if the people online can see the full screen now? I guess it's.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you, Dave and Scott, appreciate being here. The agenda says vulnerable road user safety assessment. We're talking more about in general, our highway safety program, including the strategic highway safety plan and some of the other plans that we have. Which that's not the right one. What's that? I have to get on that one. Here it goes. I put that over here. So it's kind of a paradigm shift as a part of it. Is highway safety has been something that we've been dealing with for a very long time, but we're not moving the bar as far as safety. So the definition of insanity attributed to Albert Einstein, but apparently not is. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So what are we going to do different to drive the numbers down? I should have deleted one of those slides. Anyway, The agenda, talk a little bit about our highway safety program and how we got to where we are. Discuss the strategic highway safety plan and the pedestrian and bicycle plan and the vulnerable road user assessment. All three documents have been completed within the last year or so. In the complete streets policy is something that we're working on now. And then some of the challenges and opportunities we have with highway safety. So we'll start, you've already heard introductions from my staff, but this is the staff that we have for highway safety in the DOT. As of last March, and the Highway Safety Active Transportation Administrator, that role has shifted from previous person in the position, Mike Dugas, some of you may know, was part of highway design. The highway safety program is now reporting directly to the chief engineer. So position is elevated. It's recognition of the emphasis on highway safety around the country and in all transportation agencies. We've got project delivery side of the house and the program management side of the house. Project delivery is trying to get projects on the streets to improve, make infrastructure improvements to improve highway safety. So Corey and Amanda are involved with that. Jerry Brigade is our active transportation engineer. A lot of you folks may have worked with Jerry or predecessors, Nick Sanders and Larry Kennison. Lyle Flynn I guess as of last weekend, graduated from UNH, so we're waiting anxiously for her to arrive. That will happen for us next month as an engineer on the project delivery side. Mark is taking over as a program manager for highway safety. New position, parallel position would be John Clegg with the Office of Highway Safety, if anybody's worked with that office. And Pat started Friday. He's our data analyst. And to close out that group, we're still looking to hire a highway safety transportation planner. So how is highway safety involved in DOT? It's not like we've never considered highway safety. I think going back to building all of the public roads, and Amanda's got a great library of historical books about road building. We've always thought we were incorporating safety into road design. But as we've built all these highways to make the road safer for cars, we've also made them easier for aggressive drivers and maybe less friendly for vulnerable road users. So there's kind of a shift in highway safety. But we've always had a highway safety surveillance team. So it's those little nuggets, as one of my predecessors used to call them, that didn't really have an obvious solution. So state traffic engineer, highway maintenance engineer, and highway design engineer, administrator, we get together and collectively try to review those sites and come up with what can we do different, whether it's a project, whether it's operational changes, what can we do to make this safer? A couple of decades ago, we had every 2 years, we had a statewide regional safety conferences where we would go out separate from the 10-year plan process and we would solicit concerns about safety and try to address those as well. We also had a program where we had betterment funds for intersection improvements, probably 100,000, 200,000 a year. And then when I started in the Bureau of Traffic 25 or so years ago, every month we go out to a different part of the state and try to review some of these things that keep coming up. So safety has always been something we've considered. It's always been part of our DNA, but we're going to continue to evolve. HSIP committee is a big part of that, starting in 2007 timeframe in the federal highway, created an HSIP funding category. We created an oversight committee, mostly internal, but we also, I think Dave was one of the original members, and Scott's on the committee now. So there's outside of the DOT, we have representation from MPOs, regional planning commissions, the large municipality, and the small municipality. It's important to get that perspective so that we have that perspective when we decide where to spend our HSIP funds. So this is the structure of our organization now. The blue side is more of project delivery, and the red side is the program management. The purpose of the reorganization is when I took this position over last March, one of the things I noticed is that we kept building plans, but we weren't tracking to make sure that we make the progress on those plans. And we had all engineering positions, so engineers are really good at getting projects out. So what I did, not as good as we'd like to be, but with project oriented. Once we get one project out, we don't go back and evaluate it necessarily plan for the future. We go on to the next project. So I reclassified the 3 positions in red to be more program related, Mark is gonna be the program manager, so that's. If we're gonna have plans like the strategic highway safety plan, a vulnerable road user plan, a bike ped plan that have action items, let's make sure that we're following up on those action items. Not all of them are DOT. The ones that are DOT, we want to make sure that we're circling back and make sure that we're doing the things that we thought we were gonna do. But then we have action items for other partners, stakeholders, and make sure that we keep those contacts and make sure that those things are getting done. It's kind of hard to talk about safety without discussing the safe system approach. I'm not sure how much you've heard about the safe system approach, but this is a European concept that's getting a lot of emphasis in here in the United States. It's been adopted by the US DOT through their National Roadway Safety Plan, I think it's called, was adopted in 2021. Might have been 2022 by Secretary Buttigieg. So the principle of the concept of safe system approach is that it's not chasing fires. It's got to be a systemic, they call it holistic highway safety approach. That's got 6 guiding principles in federal highway or US DOT added 7 equity, but 6 principles and it's 5 elements. So the 6 principles on the outside of this graphic, it starts with death and serious injuries are unacceptable. So if you start with the premise that we can't accept death and serious injury on our highways as the cost of doing business. That's the initial guiding principle. And then humans make mistakes, and this is kind of the biggest change in the safe system approach, that a lot of the time, a lot of crashes are human behavior oriented, and I think state public transportation agencies have said, well, we can't drive a car for them. Well, the concept of the safe system approach is that recognizing humans make mistakes, but that those mistakes should end in fatal serious injury crashes. Humans are vulnerable, it's just science of physics, that if we get cars that are bigger and move faster, vehicles versus non-motorized users, that human beings are vulnerable to injury, and responsibility is shared. So it's not just the transportation agencies, it's the enforcement side, it's culture, it's driving education, it's all of those stakeholders need to be involved, and you need to be proactive. You can't sit back and wait for crashes and respond. Well, you got to be looking to do things proactively. And then the redundancy is critical. It's often the Swiss cheese approach. If you have a series of slices of Swiss cheese and then somebody gets through the first slice, then they hit a barrier in the second or third, fourth slice. So having multiple safety elements is important. And the elements of the safe system approach start with the safe road use, which to me is the most important part, is getting people to understand their own responsibility to making the road safe. Safe vehicles is working with the automotive, the OEMs. Safe speeds is a big part of the safe system approach. And I, for one, am not a proponent of safe speeds meaning lower speed limits. It's getting people to respect the speed limits we already have, respect the speed based on the context of the road that they're on. Safe roads is more of the infrastructure element. You know, the fifth element is the post-crash care, which I think is important. But if we rely on the post-crash care, then we should have somewhere else. Anytime anybody's got any questions or comments, feel free to ask them. I've struggled with understanding the safe system approach because it seems like the redundancy part is the one part. How much redundancy is enough? Because you're still relying on people to graduate safer. We recently had this training on the safe system approach, safe system hierarchy that kind of turned the light on for me. So the hierarchy is the 1 through 4, and the first tier of the safe system approach is remove the severe conflicts. And we can do that with things like roundabouts, separated bike lanes, median barriers, settle on buffer areas. Can't do that. The next step is to reduce vehicle speeds, and you can do that by there's a list of things you can try, whether they're effective or not, I think is still subject to opinion. Gateway treatments, using target speed in our design practice and support effective enforcement. Beyond that, we can manage the conflicts in time, so protected left turn phasing, flashing yellow arrow, if anybody's seen any of those around the state, and a lead pedestrian input. So the pedestrian is going to have a concurrent head phase, get them started before the adjacent concurrent green phase gets a green light. And then the last step in the hierarchy last year is increasing attentiveness and awareness. enhanced paved markings, wrong way driving countermeasures, speed feedback signs, and things like that. So strategic highway safety plan. So this was something that was required in federal highway, initiated this highway safety improvement program in 2007. We had our initial strategic highway safety plan in 2007. It's been updated every 5 years since then. And the current one is the 2022-26 that was published in August, I think, of 2022. So it's still fairly new to us. But again, one of the reasons I put Mark in that position is we printed this, we celebrated this. I had a hard time last March finding where it was in our website. So making this public and integrating this into our everyday practices is a challenge. I highlighted the goal at the bottom, is reduce the number of fatalities and serious injuries by 50% by 2035, working towards zero by 2050. And I'll say that this is the only thing that's changed in the last 4 plans is that number moving up 5 years at a time. So we haven't necessarily reduced the number anywhere near 50%, and we're not making any progress with that. So that's a challenge that we all have. Within the strategic highway safety plan, there's a number of critical emphasis areas. I didn't list, I think they're all listed here, but vulnerable road users are actually, and that's actually 2, and the older drivers team safety are 2. So I think there's a total of 9. Intersections, roadway departure. And some of them vulnerable road users tend to be the infrastructure ones. Speed and aggressive driving is an infrastructure one, and most of the others are driver behavior. Some of the action items in the strategic highway safety plan on those critical emphasis areas in the intersections is increase intersection conspicuity with signing and marking, educate drivers to new forms of intersection traffic control, question mark and new. Roundabouts aren't new, but every time we try to go to town and offer a roundabout, we still have to tell people how effective they are. We need to educate folks better on things like that. And there's a lot of other things that other states are doing with more urban areas. But again, for intersections, we're trying to re-educate people on all-way stops, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But getting people to reach consensus on what is an appropriate safety countermeasure. Roadway departure, systemically install and maintain centerline edge line rumble strips. I can't tell you how difficult that's been. Corey and Amanda have been to a couple of public meetings where they've been giving a lot of public opinion about the noise of rumble strips. We know that they're a proven safety countermeasure, but people in some places, they understand that when somebody's hitting them, that might be have avoided a head-on crash, but they're still annoyed at the noise that it makes. So that's one of our challenges. Improve horizontal alignment, warning signs and devices. Hampshire did a pretty good job of that over the last 10 years, and improve work zone safety. And we continue to work on that all the time. Distracted driving, again, as a behavior issue, support the law enforcement folks. Same thing with impaired driving. Speed and aggressive driving, set credible speed limits using current practice. There's a lot of emphasis and naturally and with some of the urban areas about lowering speed limits. And I think in some cases that's appropriate, but it's more important for speed limits to be credible so that they'll be respected. And just coming to one of the things that we've got in New Hampshire is we've got a lot of speed limits over short stretches of road that vary quite a bit, and I think that loses credibility is the road that doesn't change, the speed limit changes, and trying to offset some of that with those past practices. Team safety, continued education, outreach to high schools and driving instructors. It's one of those things we see that team drivers are overrepresented in the serious crashes, and we were just in a couple places yesterday talked about some intersections where they've had some crashes, and it seems like a lot of it is inexperienced drivers. So to continue to educate and outreach new drivers about safe driving behavior. Vulnerable road users, motorized and non-motorized. For the non-motorized, I talked a little bit about complete streets, where we're looking to develop our first complete streets policy. So next, talk about the pedestrian and bicycle plan that we published in August of 2023. It's an update to previous bike ped plans. The quote here is from the opening, adoption letter by Commissioner Cass, where it says that walking and biking also have economic, environmental, and health benefits. Which means that investing in our active transportation is investing in our state's people. I think that's a critical part of this updated bike ped plan. I call it bike ped as ped bike. Some of the critical elements in it, it includes a full chapter on complete streets practices. So whenever the being developed, the department was still officially in a position where complete streets practices is something that we could incorporate without having a formal complete streets policy. Once we adopted the ped bike plan, our executive office let us know that they support moving forward with the complete streets policy. So the complete streets practices chapter that's in the ped bike plan is kind of what prompted the complete streets policy for the department. The key action items in the plan are updated staff training, so develop training for our staff and the consultant community for how to incorporate pedestrian and bicycle elements into designs, not just the final product, but in the traffic control plans. Data acquisition for shoulder widths and other minor elements, so that we have a better idea of what we have in our infrastructure, develop relevant design guidance, which goes with the first bullet, and develop more specific performance measures. You can't manage what you don't measure. If you don't have the relevant performance measures, it's hard to learn that. And then the big one for us is improve ped bike volume data collection. We've become pretty good, and Pat was involved with the motor vehicle detection for a few years. But it's hard for us to determine how many bikes and peds are out there, because we don't have the same methods for collecting that data, but those methods are getting better. The table on the right, the graph on the right, coming from our ped bike plan, the percentage of people that commute to work mode. You can see that the walk bike is only 3%, public transit is 1%. So hopefully by making the road safer for peds and bikes, we can improve that. Do you have a question?
Yeah, Bill, on volume data collection, pedestrians and bicycles. Without the safe infrastructure, it's gonna be a lower number. So, how are we accounting, or trying to account for that?
Yeah, Scott's probably is versus any is that it's a chicken and egg thing.
Yeah.
How many people are walking and biking to work or for recreation, and how many would if they felt safer doing it. That's a hard thing to know. You have to do that with surveys.
Yeah.
Not aware of these surveys. I think we might have done some surveys in the ped bike plan that said, ask people how safe they felt, and for the most part, the response is people that don't bike or walk more often is that they feel less safe doing so. So yeah, a big part of this plan is to make people feel safer so that they'll have more volumes.
Yeah, when I used to ride to work, and I stopped riding to work because it increasingly was unsafe. A follow-up on complete streets, what is the most challenging aspect of implementing complete streets?
I'll get into that.
Okay, thank you.
On your point about, how does having good facilities impact mode split? I mean, we can look at some communities in the state that have invested more in facilities than others and see those as targets, although you also need to think about, in the case of Portsmouth, you have concentrations of employment and residential development and other destinations in fairly close proximity, so that also encourages, people to walk the bike.
And we've seen a lot more use of e-bikes. And it's because folks can't afford a car, and yet that is an affordable alternative. Even year round.
We've seen a lot of that too, and it's interesting that when you talk about vulnerable road users and bikes and peds, from the crash perspective, I'm hearing more and more of the homeless community being involved in that, because they can't afford a car.
Right, right.
And they're forced to walk and ride to where they're going. And we were coming back from something into Concord a couple months ago, and it was still kind of colder weather. And then the suspect biking on I-93 between exits 13 and 14 in Concord, which is along the river, and it's certainly homeless camps on exit 13, and grocery stores at exit 14. So I'm guessing it was somebody who was going for services, and the shortest way was right on the shoulder of the interstate.
Right.
Some states that's pretty common with New Hampshire.
Yeah.
One of the things that was new in this head bike plan and was the level of stress analysis. I don't expect everybody to be able to read this, but it's level of stress one, the lowest stress, so where you bike with kids and families, to 4, the highest stress, which is probably more of the more experienced, confident bicyclist. And then it also includes kind of a graphic, kind of show you what that would look like, and it identifies how many miles in New Hampshire we meet those various levels of traffic stress. And the level 1 is 3 miles, which on our highways, and we got these rail trails that are probably a lot more than that, but we don't count the rail trails in this number. 902 miles in level 2, over 2,000 miles in level 3, and just about 1,000 in level 4. Vulnerable road user assessment, and again, the safe system approach graphic here again. This is something that was required as part of the reauthorization, IIJA, BIL. All states were required to complete vulnerable road user assessments as part of that, and it was required to have that done by November 15, 2023. As I said, I took over the position in March. Was already behind the time on a couple of reports that we had to get in. We really had one person before I joined. So we got a very late start on it, but we still were held that November 15th deadline, which we met. But it's intended to be a data-driven process to identify areas of high risk for vulnerable road users. We were required to consult with local governments, MPOs, regional transportation planning, and develop program projects and strategies, and to consider a safe system approach. There wasn't a lot of direction with IIJA as to what was required. There was a couple webinars along the way. So we were a long way, we were much further behind than most of our states. Almost every state struggled to meet the deadline, and part of that was because there was a lot you could do with it, but having a fixed deadline meant that we had to get that delivered to whatever level we could get the product. So that first vulnerable road user assessment might not be the best product that we could come up with, but it set the baseline for future vulnerable road user assessments. Let's say something about that. And moving to the data. So it's important to know that from this vulnerable road user assessment, federal highway perspective, a vulnerable road user does not include motorcycles. USDOT and NHTSA would call motorcyclists a vulnerable road user. But this assessment is people power transportation. I don't know how the electric bikes fit into that, or the e-assist bikes put into that, because they could be one or the other sometimes.
Good.
So what was interesting, and I think this is kind of the trend that triggered this vulnerable road user assessment requirement, is that the graph on the left is the last 5 years of crash data. So green is pedestrian, and this is crashes, and blue is bicyclists. And you can see that number has been trending down. On the right, it's non-motorized fatals and the non-motorized suspected serious injuries. And you can see that trend is going up. So while the overall crash is going down, the seriousness of the crashes is going up, which is why we were on the road user assessment. And this is kind of interesting, is again, the pets are green and the bikes are blue by month, that the peak crashes for the two modes are different, that the bike crashes are higher in the summer, which is more people are riding, but the pedestrians in the winter months are higher. Maybe that's because they're forced to walk in the street because the sidewalks aren't plowed, but I thought that was kind of interesting.
This is vehicles with a pedestrian or a cyclist.
Yes,
Okay.
because it does not include bicyclists with pedestrians, right? And if you look at the crashes occurring time of day, the time of day for both of them kind of spikes in the 4 or 5 o'clock. If you look at it by month, that number is even more strikes even more in the November to February, where it's darker at that time of day. And interestingly, who was involved? 20% of the pedestrian fatalities involved pedestrians under the influence of drugs or alcohol. 30% of the voluntary fatalities were people age 65 or older. So that it's a little personal for me in the near future.
No, I almost got hit outside just now,
Oh, yeah.
in the cross.
Who's here? So vulnerable road user strategies.
Thanks, Rob.
The safe road safety, and this is based on the safe system approach elements. So safe roads and safe speeds, enhance pedestrian and bicycle safety along the high injury network. So part of that vulnerable road user assessment was identifying high injury network, which I'm not a data person, so I'm trying to come into terms with it, but it's those segments that are overrepresented with injuries. Identify, adopt, and encourage the use of best practices. Develop a series of programs intended to provide technical assistance to local entities. And then a safe road user element. Educate state, external partners, and the public about the needs of vulnerable road users. That's part of that is our ped bike plan. Data improvements represents all 5 SSA elements, improve data collection, analysis, and traffic accessibility. So you can see some of these action items have to be consistent through our various plans. And then future investments, again, is all 5 elements. Is invest in pedestrian and bicycle safety. So complete streets policy. So the policy statement that we're working from now essentially comes from the statutes. So the statutes already say that the NHDOT is responsible for planning, developing, and maintaining the state transportation network to provide safe and convenient movement of people and goods throughout the state. That's already our statutory obligation as an agency, and we've added the last sentence in bold to kind of re-emphasize the responsibility to vulnerable road users. But this policy defines the statutory responsibility to ensure the safety of all modes and road users, including vulnerable road users. So what is a complete street? A complete street is a street that's safe and accessible to all modes and all road users. From the pedestrians, young, old, all modes and abilities, transit, cars, and you don't see necessarily trucks on this, but trucks are an important part of our complete streets because that's how we get all our stuff. So what's the biggest challenge is the challenges are coming to terms with, first of all, roadway construction. It's hard for us to build a lot of bicycle infrastructure, existing infrastructure without compromising something. And there's been some opportunities. In Concord, New Hampshire had a great opportunity to do a complete street Loud Road. Anybody that's familiar with Loud Road, so it's a commercial section of the Heights where it's 2 lanes in each direction. If you've ever driven it, you don't get 2 lanes in each direction, you get 1. Because anybody that stops with a left turn and make a left into one of the many businesses means that lane is lost for everybody else. So they had planned that they were going to do road diet. So they're going to make wider shoulders. They would have center turn lane and 1 lane in each direction. They're going to have roundabouts in a couple places. Really was a really well thought out process. But the public outcry to that project was so strong that the city turned down all the federal money that was in the building and just resurfaced it and put back what they had. So challenges some of this public perception. How do we get past that? People don't seem to understand, and maybe we need to be better educated. They don't understand that road diet was going to be at least as efficient because they weren't getting the full benefit of the 4 lanes, and they're going to get a much safer product. So coming to consensus, and one of the other challenges we have is a lot of complete streets elements, the pedestrian bike elements. The state historically has not maintained, whether it's sidewalks or bike lanes and crosswalks, things like that. And getting towns and communities to municipalities to accept that responsibility or finding an alternative means, either through federal funding or some other way to get those things maintained. Because that has been a little block for us as well. Is get a lot of support for putting sidewalk elements in, pedestrian elements in, but then the towns find out that they're going to have to maintain them and keep them plowed. They're not interested. So how do we get past that very far?
The stormwater runoff too, it's one that popped up, I believe, like the Summersworth. The 108 project, I think that's a big part of,
I think that's titled the Police Bridge Project, right?
yeah, and seems like it's maybe getting less and less so all the time. Secondhand, but
Yeah, I'm not current on what the status of that is, all that stuff, Stratford, right?
strapping.
It's a situation whereby adding curb sidewalk, you then necessitated structured drainage and.
Yeah, the cost just.
That happens too. So that's complete streets, and how does this group, how do we implement some of these things? One of the things that we could do, and it's in our toolbox, is road safety audit. So one of the ways that we identify highway safety improvement projects is, you go around the state, we know that there's a lot of needs, but how do we prioritize those needs? So road safety audits are the applications for those are submitted by the communities through regional planning. The road safety audit involves a multidisciplinary team to evaluate specific safety concerns to see if we can come up with short, intermediate, and long-term safety countermeasures. Include tabletop discussion and field observation. And then once we get to identify those short, intermediate, long-term, and then again, this is one of the things that we need to do a better job at is how to implement those things. Make sure that we identify, once we're done with the road safety audit, identify who's responsible for the next step, and how we get those into the capital program. So that's kind of the process for the road safety audit. It starts with the identify the project, which is usually local, select the RSA team, which is usually DOT, local first responders, like RPC, local stakeholders, either abutters or people who have heard practice, people that know what the issues are. We conduct a startup meeting, perform field reviews, those you combine into one event. And then a lot of ours have been done by consultants, so they conduct analysis to prepare a report. The report is then vetted through our executive office in the community, and then that creates the final report, and then we'll need to do better job of this incorporate the findings of the report. So challenges for highway safety for us. Challenges are, first of all, driver behavior. So I talked to Lucy about it over here. It seems like wherever you drive, you look ahead of you, look behind you, people are doing real foolish things. And how do we get people to understand that their own behavior is the first step in making our highway safer? And then not trying to correct everybody else's behavior, but dealing with the things they can control in their own vehicle. And that means influencing the people that they are associated with, their kids, their family, everybody else that they drive with. And one of the things that I'm a proponent of is, for years, we've relied on the hammer or the stick to try to correct driver behavior for the enforcement side of things. We need to find more of a carrot. I've been using the script store, PRYP store app for a while, which is a safe driver app. So it measures your driving speed, swerving, braking, things like that, and it's gives you a score. And there are some benefits. I think in the last year plus, I've gotten $300 or $400 in benefits from it. But we need to come up with more of those carrots to encourage people to drive safe, because it's the right thing to do, and not in fear of being arrested or pulled over. We had a peer exchange on work zone speed cameras on one. And it's Paradise Valley, Arizona. It was the first automated enforcement in the country. And it's an affluent part of Arizona, it's at the Phoenix, Scottsdale area. And it was because the automated enforcement doesn't go with your driver's license, so the driver goes to the registered owner of the vehicle. There were people that would get 50-something citations a year because they could afford it. It was worth it was worth their time to pay the ticket because they could drive as fast as they wanted. So we got to be able to find ways to encourage people to do it because it's the right thing, not to try to penalize them. We got to overcome years of car first highway design, construction, maintenance, and operation. In terms of the DOT, I don't know how many times I sit on the traffic control committee, and we've had a bridge project where they talked about closing the bridge and, well, the detour only 20 miles. Well, that might be okay for a car, but if the person that's using that bridge is biking or walking, that's a long detour. So getting people to think about all modes in the design phase and overcoming that decades of car first mentality Data side, of pedestrian and bicycle volumes, crash data quality continue to struggle, especially with the personal identification information challenges. We're getting good crash data and inventory data, the network screening is something that we're working on as well. Reaching consensus is a challenge for us, because a lot of times we go into communities, and they automatically know what the solution is. And maybe that's not the right solution, so reaching a consensus on something that we can move forward with is tough. Resources versus demand development can be a challenge. But there are also opportunities, and one of the opportunities, talk about complete streets. Big data and artificial intelligence is going to continue to play a bigger role in what we do. Just on the speed data side, the pro data that we have now, and we purchased Compound Pro data, that is a department that we could use for real-time traffic monitoring. So we would know when there was an unexpected reduction in traffic, and we could go figure out what caused it and try to alert people to that event. But because we bought that data for that purpose, we also have that historical data to do things like speed studies. Now, where before, if we want to do a speed study at some paddle, if this rubber tube stretch across one point, particular stretch of road, and we get all the data for 3 or 4 days for that one point, and then assume that that was relevant to that whole road. Now, in the course of 15 minutes, I can create a compound speed study and get the data for that whole stretch as it changes along the stretch. And that data is only going to be more and more available to us in some of the types of data. And then innovative design and design alternatives. So a couple things that I've got listed here, intersection controls. We've been looking a lot more at two-way to always stop control. Some of these intersections, these rural intersections that we have been to time and time again, and tried to make the stop sign bigger, the flash, the intersection beacon, and we still have crashes and complaints. And we're finding from research that some states have done that maybe we just go to the always stop. We've always avoided that for years and years and years because it creates delay, and we've always avoided creating delay. But maybe that in some cases that's not so bad. And this region that I think where it's still hanging in the balance is in Kingston or East Kingston at 107 and 108, the west side of it, where there's a T intersection with 2 stop signs, and continue to have complaints about it. Well, the third stop sign might create a little bit of delay short term, but during peak traffic periods, but it might make the intersection a lot safer. So while that's not really innovative, it's a new way of thinking. And roundabout versus traffic signal control. We're really good now at looking at roundabouts as an alternative to traffic signals for any new intersection project, but we've got 450 traffic signals around the state. Why aren't we looking at some of those maybe more appropriate as a roundabout, especially in the rural locations where you might not have the warrants back for those signals. So if we're gonna have to upgrade a signal, why don't we consider making that a roundabout, which is a lot safer? And then consideration of lesser traffic level of service during peak periods. That's something that's really big for us to think about, because we've always designed for like the worst case traffic condition. Well, maybe we accept that worst case traffic condition so that it can be safer throughout the day. With some of the folks that are on the DOT for a long time, that's a hard concept to get through, but we're working on it. Here's some of the locations that we're dealing with in Rockingham County. So Brentwood's probably a lot of folks are familiar with 125 South Road. There were a couple of fatals there in the last few years. So we're working with the town and Council Stevens to address that. Salem, 111 at Irma Road. Again, it's 125 and 111 are the 4 roads we have where we could argue for traffic signals almost every intersection. But if you do that for every intersection, then you have, it's not very efficient for traffic. But Salem is one where I think the town wanted a signal, just put a signal there, but they're consulting, they're managing the project is kind of directing us toward the roundabout. Hampton 1A, Ocean Boulevard. I know we've got the Ocean Boulevard project, but in advance of that, we're looking at what can we do in the meantime for pedestrian crossings. Blackstone 121A, Main Street, east of 125. So we've got 2 projects. We've got the 121A traffic calming project, and we've got a 125 traffic signal coordination project. So between the 2, try to get people to stop using 121A on Main Street to avoid signals on 125 and get people to drive slower going through those more residential areas. And Scott and Dave are always know how to find me, so if anybody's got other locations, certainly share them with them and with me. With that, I appreciate your time, again, I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Bill, you started out by saying that the goal of reducing fatalities by 50%. It's been a continual 5-year plan, and we haven't made much progress on that. You also put up Mr. Ryan's statement that doing the same thing is not going to get us any different results. But by extrapolation on that, we've come up with a lot of different ideas, a lot of different data sources over each of those 5-year things, segments, and yet nothing is changing. In your mind, what's the problem?
I think we have a cultural problem where people have accepted crashes as the cost of doing business, and we gotta get people to beyond that thing. When I see the driver behavior, I mean, I went to Long Island last week and on Long Island and then back to Connecticut, when I see people with motorcycles that are dipping, they're splitting lanes with a motorcycle on an interstate highway. People are willing to take that risk. There's been these crashes, and the indisputable fact is that more often than not, people aren't getting in crashes. So there's a small percentage of people that are in crashes, but those crashes tend to be pretty severe. So how do we get people to understand that the risk that they're taking could result in more crashes? Infrastructure stuff takes time because we've got so many millions of miles of infrastructure to deal with. But behavioral stuff is something that I think we can all work with. I got a backpack in here. I've got the quarters in the here picture book I carry around with me all the time. Anybody that's going to sign it, more than happy to pass it on the table. But we learned when we're 2 years old that slow and steady wins the race. And when we get a driver's license at 16, everybody thinks they got to go 100 miles an hour. And how do we reverse that culture? And I think there's going to be a press conference in Hampton with the state police tomorrow on safety, summer safety, and impairment is going to be a big part of that. And I grew up in the 60s, 70s, where I know my younger brother's friends' fathers were taking the Red Sox games from Western Maine to Boston. And the old station wagon, kids all the way in the back, and then a bench seat in the front, there'd be a case of beer for the 2 adults, the responsible adults, taking kids to Boston. So we've kind of gotten the cultural change to understand that a case of beer in the front seat is not a good thing, but we still have impaired driving. So how do we keep shifting that awareness so that people understand the risks of bad road behavior? And I think that's where the safe system approach, where it's shared responsibility, is important. That it can't just be the DOT. A lot of times, the DOT is the focus of attention. When people have a complaint, they call the DOT first. You need to fix this before somebody dies. We go there. Well, what are we going to fix? What are we going to do different? Because this looks like every other intersection in the state. It's the people in the driver's seat that we got to try to get hold of. I don't know if that answers your question, but it seems like that's the challenge we have.
I was just gonna add a couple of things. A lot of what Bill described has come out of plans completed in the last couple of years too. And so it needs to be time for those things to be implemented. And in New Hampshire, given the way the 10-year plan works and the amount of funding, actually incorporating infrastructure changes is a 10-year and onward process. But as Bill was describing, we're also competing against more and more infotainment systems in cars and driver distraction, and auto companies that have an incentive to sell larger, more powerful vehicles, whether trucks or sports cars, but particularly SUVs and trucks with higher front ends, that when they do collide with the pedestrian, now that the higher front end knocks the pedestrian down rather than a lower front end on a hood that would tend to put somebody up over the hood. So trying to compete with millions of dollars in advertising, pushing larger, more powerful vehicles that would be driven in more aggressive ways, presumably. So I mean, that's a challenge for the outreach and public education piece of this. So
I worked for a very large company, I'm retired on that, but that company invested a lot of money and time in training. Every month, sometimes every week, every employee was required to take lots of training modules. I'm gonna guess I averaged 2 to 3 hours a week in training. And it went on and on and on, always did it. Whether or not it was effective at reducing the errors and safety incidents that they were trying to reduce, I don't know. But it seems to me that something might be done in your situation with mandatory safety training required at time of driver's license renewal.
Yeah, we in New Hampshire, in America, value our freedoms, and if you get some of those things. It is always a challenge. One of my colleagues in Europe, a lot of them, found that all new vehicles in Europe are required to have automatic speed control. They can turn it off, but they're required to have automated speed control that would keep you at the speed limit or gallon speed. I don't know how that would never pass in the United States, because like Scott said, we're promoting people buying these faster cars. The awareness stuff, I think, motor vehicle folks would be the ones that we talked about trying to get that required training. I think I've heard discussion about that in the past. Trying to find a sponsor for it and language that would be acceptable. I'd like to see us, at the very least, when they send a notice for a driver's license renewal, have a list that somebody would have with any new laws since the last renewal, recent laws have changed, so that people would understand things like roundabouts, or, if somebody passed their driver's license at 16, we don't require them to get any further education. I mean, if I was a basketball referee, I had to get continuing professional development hours before I could focus on a basketball court, but I don't need anything to get me to drive a car on highway. Yes.
That's one obstacle I've seen is the lack of education. I don't know a way around it. I mean, the Brentwood example, when you guys presented, you're explaining the benefits of the long-term roundabout solution, how it's safer. I mean, it was really clear to me as a transportation professional, but you had the residents go, I just don't understand why we can't have a light. It worked at the other intersection. I don't know how to combat that. And even the DOT has a really nice infographic on roundabouts that I've shared in town with people, but you can't force people to read it. So.
Things on roundabout versus signal, I think on the road, we have locations where we try to get people to understand is that if you have a very busy major route that stops at a traffic signal, and you get to the end of the queue, you can see the green light, the red light, there might be 10 or 15 cars in front of you. That light turns green, you can see it turn green, but you're not moving. So every one of those cars in front of you moves, because actually it's one right in front of you moves, because you can't go forward, you're like bumper moves, but with the roundabout, they're moving all the time, because it's more of a constant queue or a moving queue, it's not like a fixed queue. I mean, traffic signal stops back there. The roundabout slows them down, but people have a hard time grasping. I mean, the hard thing about signals is if you're in the back of that queue, you see it turn green, you're not moving, and you're waiting for that car in front of you to move. By the time you get to the intersection, you're at full speed, and if it turns yellow, you're probably not gonna wanna wait for another cycle.
Yeah.
Scott, can you admit that we stopped the share so we can see everything that's over? There's folks that are online that have questions. They can see it too, so sorry to disrupt.
I was just gonna say, Bill, really glad you're in the position you're in. I think you're a tremendous resource for the state. At Coast, every single rider is a vulnerable user at some point or multiple points during their trip, so really important to us. Two things that I wanted to ask about roundabouts, and particularly where there's pedestrians. Like I go through the roundabout at the end of Silver Street in Dover multiple times a day, usually. And almost every time I see a pedestrian in that roundabout, I almost see a collision. And I struggle to understand how roundabouts are safer for all users. I think in areas with very, very low pedestrianism, that there's probably a very good case statement for that, but where there's pedestrians, I haven't seen a situation where the pedestrian is safe.
Yeah, the science, the evaluation of roundabouts with pedestrians, the data shows that they're safe for pedestrians, but the science is that everybody comes into a roundabout has to slow down. One of the challenges is that we've been kind of truck centric for a long time. If you design a roundabout so it's comfortable for a large truck to go through, then it's gonna be comfortable for cars to go through a lot faster. So finding that balance of geometry that's gonna slow people down. And the pedestrians are always crossing one vehicle behind the yield bar at the roundabout. So theoretically, the vehicle is waiting for it to enter the roundabout and the pedestrian behind them. So the person that's approaching them should be going. They have to get to the roundabout and pause before they can enter it. So the data shows that it's safer for pedestrians. I know the challenge has always been for the visually impaired is circular movement is harder for them to pick up, which is why you end up with the pedestrian. If it's a 2-lane roundabout, you end up with a pedestrian hybrid beacon or a signal for it. The one in Dover that I think it's still Dover, but it's Spur Road and Boston Harbor Road.
Oh, yeah.
They have a really hard time there because it's 2 lanes coming off the highway and Spur Road with the pedestrian hybrid beacon. People aren't always they're looking at the cars next to them. They're not looking at the hybrid signal on the top.
Yeah.
So we've heard complaints about that, but we evaluated what we'll do for the person crossing.
And you're looking back when there might be something happening in front of you. The other thing I was just gonna add, there's a really great book that just came out. I think it's called When Driving Isn't an Option. We're reading it we're reading it on our staff right now. You'll read it and go, yeah, of course. Yeah, but it's just reiterating the importance of all users when we're designing.
Yeah, one of the things that Gary Guevara on staff is really stressed is that I think historically we looked at walking and biking as an option, more of a recreational option than a personal choice. So people are kind of outdoorsy and we call it spandex crowd, if that's right. But we're finding that there's more and more people that are biking or walking because they don't have another choice. And I think it's important to understand, like when we're talking about temporary traffic control, that closing the bridge doesn't mean that that person that's normally biking or walking across that bridge now will take a car for the next 2 months. They might not have that choice.
Right.
And it's important to understand.
And they'll find a way to cross that bridge.
Yeah, right. Dodging between cones.
Won't be safe, but they'll find a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's true.
This is good.
Thank you. Thank you. I copied that onto your desktop, so.
Excellent, I appreciate it. Food has arrived, as maybe you might have noticed. If we want to take just like 5 minutes, if people want to grab food, do that, and then we can get back to business. I think we should have plenty of time in the meeting. So those of you on Zoom can bear with us for a couple minutes while we reorganize. Get back to it, so. Feel free to dig in.
All data.
I'm sorry.
And the product quality, you know,
they took all data to meet all data, including personal identification. Not all data, except that. There are some states that have, privacy laws very similar to ours, so that is the next step is to get on those states. Which are still receiving grants for that, like how they got.
If you're a vehicle, yeah, you're flying down the road, it's like something like bang, it's on a truck.
Right.
It's like,
or others who just.
look at it.
Right,
I mean, it's like who's in trouble with that?
Right, yeah, it's a very good.
Yeah, I will always be in trouble when I hit you, but.
Right.
But
Internal data.
it's something you're not. You're defining this vehicle.
Recently, that issues that should not be partisan, I think that's very partisan, some
Yeah.
things like bike is apparently are vulnerable, that, they be like. He's always going to use that, yeah, another goal we can use, and just get like, oh, it's not identification, like, if you're. Now I know. Just becoming one of those, not that, I mean, yes. Cause I don't think people, yeah, it's not like, he's not, it's funny, being outside, they people, you're not gonna get people asking, about the quality of our crash data, so one of.
Well, we talked about that intersection.
Job.
Instant
Now,
education, yeah, if you don't go there, if you're not there, I'm gonna they're all just sitting there looking at each other and then somebody's coming and turning and then.
start to talk to people more on the top about what's going on.
Like, sit around and wait all the time.
Yeah.
And.
It's a lot of work.
The white
Okay, try and get started back up here, get through the remainder of the agenda. The next item on our agenda to talk about, is the project selection criteria and the weighting process that we're doing on that. At the end of this discussion, I would like a motion and, approval from the TAC committee. Basically setting our criteria weights, for this round of the 10-year plan project selection process. So, I've got a presentation, on that, and you probably are not surprised. I am going to go through chunks of it fairly quickly, but we can go back and go over things as needed. We'll try to make our way through this. We've got, newish faces here who are coming into this process to sort of in the middle, or maybe even towards the end of this actual process of setting our criteria weights. Any questions, please say something to me, you folks online as well. We'll try to make our way through this as efficiently as we can, and hopefully everybody has a good handle on where we're going. So this is setting the project selection criteria weights for both our long-range transportation plan as well as the state 10-year plan and the project selection process that goes along with that. So just sort of the math of it all is that, we have these 8 categories of criteria, and all of those should total up to 100% of the project weight score, right? And we set different weights for different criteria based on the importance to, well, essentially the folks in this room, as it's the TAC committee that is sort of in charge of that. And these will vary a little bit based on the scale of the project. As you may remember, we break our projects into 3 groups by scale, whether it's a local scale project, something that's maybe happening on Main Street in the town, versus a regional scale project, which is looking at connections between communities, versus those very large scale projects that are interregional in nature. They connect our region to other regions. Maybe they deal with projects on I-95 or 101 or major highways like that. The one thing I will say is the one change that I do make to the outcomes that the TAC does through the survey process, and we said is I basically round the numbers to the whole percentages. So we aren't dealing with something being more 27.367%, right? Just round it right up. So I'm going to go through the weightings that were set based on the survey that TAC members filled out. This is at the local scale for the local scale projects. Again, talking about these smaller scale localized projects, and the breakdown of the weighting based on the survey results is as shown on the screen here. Safety being the highest sort of percentage weight. About 20% of the total score, and as you can see, going through each of those down that list. The change from last round is what I put into the column on the far right. As you can see, mostly it's up or down a little bit, with the largest one being the support with a 7% increase over what we were talking about last round. So last round it was at 9% of the total score. This round it's proposed to be 16%. Any questions so far on this? Mark?
It seems like there should be like environmental quality or air quality. Does that capture under any of these?
It's not really well captured. And that's something, that we talked about a lot at the state level. Again, these criteria are the ones that we use statewide. So all 9 planning commissions use these same criteria. And what we ended up coming to sort of a quasi agreement on, I guess, at the state level, I would say, is that it's really hard to understand the environmental benefits of a project that is, 10 years out and is, you just don't know enough details to really say. That being said, we do take some of that stuff into account in various ways. The equity and accessibility discussion includes a little bit about environmental justice, so that's kind of part of that, making sure that, you know, communities aren't bearing more than their fair share of the brunt of the costs of a project, or you know, those kind of things. Also, the natural hazard resilience, that tends to be, when we look at that, I mean, that is, you know, almost purely an environmental issue. It tends to focus in this region on the coast, on coastal resilience. Interior, we look at, you know, are there things like undersized stream crossings within the scope of a project? So that's something that, you know, they might be addressing, you know, those kinds of things. So, but, you know, we don't necessarily look at, you know, what are the air quality benefits of a project? What are, you know, other environmental benefits that are out there? And it's something, you know, that we probably need to try to do better accounting for, but we haven't quite figured out how to do that. And the other thing I would add to that is, you know, anytime we're talking about bike and pedestrian projects or transit projects, there are clear environmental benefits for those types of projects. So, and that tends to be a lot of projects at this scale too. So it's sort of inherited, but we don't necessarily categorize it or capture those numbers. Right.
I have a really hard time with 16% for support.
It's a lot.
Because at this point, what does support represent?
Support, yeah, I mean, that's represented, it's maybe the project is in a longer range plan somewhere. Maybe the select board has written a letter saying this is a top priority for our community. That's the level of support we're talking about at this level, you know, this level. You know, when a project actually gets into the 10-year plan and starts moving towards construction, say it has a local match, DOT at that point requires an agreement with the community to say that they'll fund it. They, you know, they commit to that. At this level, we're looking for, yes, this project is a priority for our community, and we've talked about it amongst ourselves and come to some agreement that that's a priority. That's the level of support we're talking about.
Yeah, which I don't think should be above 10% at most.
Okay.
Personally.
Yeah, all right, so we'll.
Wait, that's where my stake is.
Okay, let's go through the rest, and then we'll at the end, we can sort of talk about all of this at once, but I think that's a valid concern. It is a lot, and it's a lot more than it usually is. When we look at the regional level, we see a little bit of shift between the things, and we see support actually drop back to where it was last year for this level, so about 9-10%, you know. At the regional level, we're talking about connections between the communities, and we see a little less focus on safety, a little more focus on network significance, and the state of repair and the mobility issues being a concern amongst TAC members. And so we have the weights that are as listed. As you can see, for the most part, very small changes, plus or minus 1 or 2%. But mobility went up 5%, and equity and accessibility went down 6%. So some big shifts there based on the survey results.
So Dave, can I ask, when your survey you're referring to one sent out to just the TAC,
Yes.
right? So did you get a good response rate, or what was the?
We had 12 TAC members respond and fill out the survey. Not as many as I was hoping, but reasonable numbers. You know, in the end, we use this as a starting point, and if the TAC at this meeting says, we don't like this, we want to adjust these and come up with what is a more agreeable distribution, then we absolutely can do that. All right. At the interregional level, again, have some shifts from the previous round. With mobility surprisingly dropping at the interregional level, as well as accessibility and equity, with some increases in concern about the state of repair and economic development as being important considerations. So this is the distribution as it showed up, based on based on survey results. Again, this is all information that went out to you. I just sort of broke it up into pieces. Any questions on these immediately? All right. So when we pull them all together, you know, this is kind of what it looks like, and this is the table that I sent out to TAC members. So. All of them do total up to 100%, which is always good. That means my math is done right. Yeah, and I think we just need to discuss whether these numbers make sense. And I'm going to go into some of the details on the considerations within each of those criteria, right? So we have the categories that we talk about, and within that, we talk about different pieces of it. So under economic development, we talk about access to activities, you know, and activity centers, and freight movement or goods movement as being the two considerations. And so this was the split that came out of it. You can see these are the survey allows me to spit out these graphics, kind of show the distribution of answers to these questions. And you'll see that there's an average there, and that's it doesn't quite work out. Again, the average might be off slightly from what I'm showing here, and basically some of that is a counting issue. For instance, on economic development, folks felt that access to activity centers was more important than goods movement, so that access to activity centers will be 50% of that economic development score. Freight and goods movement will be 43% of that score. Under the equity and accessibility, we have almost the flip of that, where working on expanding transportation choices was 41% of the score, and reducing barriers to access is 59, or just under 60% of the score. So a little bit of a flip there. When we get into mobility, this one was exactly the same as last cycle. Addressing current congestion was considered the priority there. It was 60% of the score, and working on just improving mobility in general, 40%. Under the natural hazard resilience, areas of this is much more of an even split, with the risk areas that are at risk of natural hazards being 52% of the score, and then what is specifically proposed to mitigate those natural hazards at 48%.
It was a little tough to delineate between those two.
Yeah,
things,
it really
what they
is.
meant.
It's like, is it more important that it's an area that is subjected to natural hazards, or is it more important that what's being proposed to mitigate is really what it was? And yeah,
Right, you
kind of the
think they
flip
would
side.
be-
Same one.
You know, the places that are the most subject to it would be the place that would have the mitigation projects.
I think you could frame it as, if you think about a project that's happening in the coastal flood zone, for instance, but it really doesn't have anything proposed to address mitigate the problem.
Oh, I see it, the project itself
Yeah,
isn't
so
solving.
that's how kind of I look at it, is that way. So I've got three up on this slide. Network significance, where the focus is, and this was an interesting, and I want to point this one out. I highlighted this in red because of what I sent out to the committee, I messed up, and I put the wrong numbers in there, I think. So it showed like a 58-42 kind of split, but really, when I looked at the numbers again, I was like, wait a minute. So 30% will be based on the traffic volume at the location, right? And 70% will be based on facility importance. In this case, will be functional classification. So that's where that is coming in. Under safety, also a 30-70 split. Focus more on the proposed safety measures as opposed to the historic safety performance at the site. And then state of repair, this is looking at addressing the current infrastructure condition will be 59% of the score, while reducing future maintenance needs would be 41% of the score. And then finally, when we get into that support criteria, this is the odd one out in that there are three different pieces of support that we defined in the past. They're sort of looking at local support, regional support, and a newly identified critical need, right? And so that'll be split 34, 32, 34, as listed on the page. So focus there will be mostly on addressing local support, as well as if somebody's come up with a new project that's this identified critical need, that'll be very important. So when we get right down to it, this is sort of how things break down. And I'll just use the economic development ones as an example instead of going through all of these. So economic development is worth 9% of the score at the local and regional levels, 12% at the interregional level. Under all three of those, access activity centers will be 57% of the score, while goods movement will be 43% of the score, right? And so that's carried all the way through each of these. So that's kind of where we're at. This is this is draft. We can talk about making adjustments to that. Brad's brought up the issue of support being a very large percent of the score. And it looks like I messed up on my numbers there because.
Yes.
Yeah.
3 reasons.
Updated that. So maybe focus on what's on your memo. As to what Dave says on the screen. So, yeah, so. Oh, wait a minute.
The thing.
Oh, boy.
The memo says
Memo
wait
says
for
the same thing.
2022.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I did not update the title on that, but I updated all the numbers, but let me double check up on the support side of things. I don't think I have anything more. Let me just go through this last slide. We use these to prioritize projects for the state tenure plan in the short term. But we also prioritize all the projects that are long range transportation plan doing this. Basically between now and the June meeting, I'll go through and we'll apply these percentages that we've come up with here at the end to the projects that are listed that we have. And I'll come up with a draft sort of list of priorities based on that and bring that to the next meeting. We take that list and we try to figure out, based on our budget that we have available, how many of those projects can we send to our consulting engineer team to give us some update, some cost estimates and scope updates. What I need today, assuming that I can figure out my math, is recommended approval of the product selection criteria weights from the committee today. So I'm gonna jump out of this and set the share. See if I can't. Bear with me for a minute while I. See my mess on the spreadsheet. Okay. This is what it should have been showing. And that. Maybe it makes sense for me to share this as well to folks on Zoom. Oops, wrong one. All right, so this is what we should have been seeing for those percent totals right there. And it looks like I messed up in my. Oops. It's like support one, I definitely messed up on. Everything else, I think.
So Dave, is the one where you talked about when Brad raised the issue or question about this increase in 16 of that first, one of the first slides?
Yeah.
You showed it from before to now. I think that's sort of easier to, at least for me to comprehend as I'm looking at it.
Yeah, so yeah, it's the support, and so this is local, regional, and regional. This is the map, has the actual totals behind it. But yeah, I think I just made a mistake when I put the numbers in the table here on the end of the memo. So that should be under support, it should be 16, 9, 10. I think everything else lines up. Yeah, so everything else makes sense on that memo on page 2. So it's really, support should say 16% under local, 9% under regional, and 10% under interregional. And I just mistranslated. So it happens when you're rushing. So, okay, so I guess, next steps would be, discussions about what we wanna do with these percentage breakdowns. I know Rad's put forward that support is too high for local, but.
Can you go back to the slide when they show for 22 to what you're doing, proposing now, because I just think it's easier to see.
I see, yep.
Percentage.
To see the percentage and so facilitate the discussion that way. Because that's when I was looking at that initially, it looked like it's kind of way too get to it. Obviously, the regions decide what they want, but it just.
You were talking about, this one. The one?
Yeah, but yeah, where it showed the change.
Yeah, okay, let me share that so the folks on the screen see what we're talking about. Okay, so, all right, so yeah, this shows, and in each of these for local, regional, and interregional, I showed the change from the last round, basically, is what I showed, and that's.
I guess what sort of surprises me a little bit, I mean, obviously, is that, you know, you did do your natural hazard vulnerabilities assessment report a couple of years ago, and now seeing that that's proposing that to be less. I'm just thinking, you know, like, wow, that's interesting that you would have gone through that exercise and knowing that, you know, the storm events are changing and all of that. And, you know, there's, you know, obviously at a national level looking at how all that is impacting communities on a range of activities, not only transportation, so that just jumped out at me.
Yeah, I agree, I was surprised to see the number go down.
Yeah.
You know, again, this is all based on the results of the survey. I did not take the survey myself, so I don't feel like that's, since I'm the one that does the actual scoring, I feel like I should, I should be filling out the survey to say. And I think everybody knows my opinions about various aspects of these based on our previous discussions, so. Any concrete thoughts on how we might want to adjust this, or if we do want to adjust this?
And now, did that change just for the local or for all of the different regional?
So
And on the other ones.
naturally, it went down a bit for regional and interregional, it went down a bit, so it went down across the board. But I don't know if we should maybe take these one at a time, like focus on local weighting and then go in regional and interregional.
I have kind of a procedural question personally. I look at these numbers on this that you sent out to us. There's 3 rows on support, but there's only 2 rows on the other thing. So necessarily, we've got 3 categories to split your percentages in on support, whereas on the others, you only have 2 categories.
Right.
Doesn't that skew the whole thing away from support?
No, because no matter what, the total of that score will be whatever percentage is decided. I mean, basically, so.
Whatever that green
So
row is.
as it is here on the screen, right? So that's 16% of support at the local, on the local scale projects will be made up of 34% based on community priority, 34% or 32% based on regional support, and 34% based on critical, a newly identified critical need. So if it's a highly supported project from a community, but there's no regional support and it's a need that isn't like newly identified as a critical need, then it might score very poorly, but it's still, however it scores, it's still only gonna be worth 16% of the of the total score, and it's just basically how it's distributed within that.
So I also see under support that local, regional, and interregional have all the same numbers, community,
Yeah.
regional, and critical support.
Do you
Yes,
think the community priority would be bigger on local and the regional support would be biggest on regional? Yeah.
so it gets, the minute I start, if you notice that across the board within each category.
Yeah, they're all
the same.
Yeah.
Right, and that's something that I've explained from the beginning, because it gets really incredibly complicated
to get that
if
change.
suddenly I'm shifting those percentages too.
Yeah.
It's basically like, if you look at the document that we sent out earlier this year that has the detailed information about what each of these categories are, and the one that was put out by all 9 planning commissions and DOT. There's a lot of things that go into talking about economic development or national health resiliency. We have to kind of focus it in, because we could really pick 10 or 20 different things under some of these categories that are important aspects of a project that we want to consider. But for the purposes of scoring them, we need to have a couple of things that we can kind of focus in on. Otherwise, the more you include in that, the more diluted everything gets. And so what we're trying to do is come up with a reasonable number of criteria that we're looking at when we're talking about any individual project. And this is what we come up with. And it's certainly not without its problems. I 100% agree with that. We don't really consider many of the environmental issues. We have to make a lot of guesses about things, and that's probably the biggest handicap of this whole thing, is that it's a lot of guesswork of, yes, that seems like that project will help safety. It's proposing to put a roundabout in. We know roundabouts are safer than signalized intersections. So yes, there is a safety benefit, but we can't, we don't have the information to quantify that and say, okay, it will result in 25 less crashes per year, or 1 less fatality per 5 years, or whatever. We don't have that information really on a scale where we can apply it to 100 or so projects. And so we have to make do with what we've got. And so that ends up where we're at. So
What makes all those 3 sets of same numbers come out with different percentages in the green line above?
So that's the different percentages are based on what the survey respondents chose as their priority. So if you remember in the survey, I asked each of you to go through and say, what is the, rank in priority, economic development, equity, accessibility, mobility, natural hazard resiliency, network significance, safety, state of repair and support at the local level. What's your priority there versus at the regional level and interregional level? So you answer that question 3 times, once for each. And this is basically, the green line is the distribution of priorities based on those survey results. So that's why it's different in each. So basically what people were saying is that at the local scale projects, support is a much more important piece of the puzzle than it is at the regional or interregional level. It's basically what it boils down to. So that's where we're at. Tim, you have a question?
Not a question, a comment about the 16%. I think we wanted to give, especially for local, credit for projects where maybe the 20% local match was in a capital improvement plan, or maybe a letter from the Board of Selectmen saying they supported the project and it was in their budget. So we could, rank those projects a little higher rather than just a letter of interest, which might be, some indication of support, but not a longer term commitment. So
Okay.
that would be my rationale for the increased percentage in support for local projects anyway.
Okay. Yep.
I didn't do the survey, so
Okay.
You don't steal the result.
So, Brad, would you clarify your lack of support for the increase in support? As to why you think it's 7% is too much to jump?
Or.
I think it's incredibly easy to write a letter to say we support this project. And it's included in some document at this point, when the project is 10+ years out.
Right. So an initial
There's
application,
no-
it's too easy,
Yeah.
too hard to determine a high level of support.
Right, and there's no binding
Mark, we've committed so much money to this,
Right,
yeah. we
right, there's
guarantee
nothing,
that we
there's
will-
nothing there, so you get. If you're applying for one of these and you don't get 16% on that. Or get full score on that. Well, you
Yeah,
submitted
you
that.
shouldn't be, yeah.
You know,
Should have submitted in the first.
the one thing I tend to focus on this is, especially those communities that have submitted multiple projects, I want to make sure that it's a priority for them.
Yeah.
So that's part of that consideration as well. I don't just look for that support letter. It's,
Sure.
you know, Portsmouth has, I don't know, maybe 15 projects in the long range plan. But I don't necessarily want to pick probably 15, you know, rank 15 if, you know, they have other priorities. So I say, so when we get that correspondence back to the community and they say, City of Portsmouth says, these are our projects, these are our priorities. Well, I like, look at that. That's kind of what I look at as opposed to looking strictly at a support letter. That certainly helps. To indicate that, yes, the community has at least talked about this project a little bit. In a public setting where the select board could say, yeah, we really want to put this in. But, you know, as much as that is looking at what's the priority for the community.
Yeah, I guess to me, looking at that percentage compared to the other categories. I kind of agree with him that it strikes me as being one of the highest, and is support really that much more important than natural hazards resiliency at the local level? To me, I don't think so. I think they're all important in their own way, but
Right.
comparatively, I think I would vote to tip the scale a little bit too.
Both of those items, natural hazard resiliency and support, are just perceptions of the need at that, for that particular item. And why would support be, you know, or natural hazard resiliency, merit being different from one another? I think I lost my train of thought.
I don't think they're the same thing because natural hazards resilience is a narrower field than local support. I think the word priority is the key on support. And it's gonna get a one, you know, 100% from all communities that have one project. But said for Portsmouth, if it ever, we really want to know, you know, kind of 5 priorities or 15 priorities, you know, where this ranks, and that's gonna take a lot of those lower ranked ones and just knock them out if you can give it a fairly good value, because for local projects, you know, they're not gonna get everything. They're not gonna get 16% for everything that they put in. It's gonna be maybe the number one probably will get 16%, and then we'll go down from there.
Well, no, they'll all get 16%.
Right.
It's just how much of a score that 16% represents. Is it, you know, think about it as their top priority. And I'm just gonna throw random numbers out here. So like, say your top priority
I
gets
see.
5 points under that 16%, right?
Yeah,
Their bottom priority might get 1 point
Right,
under
okay,
that
that's-
16%.
yeah, I see what you
Right,
mean,
that's kind of how it breaks down. And you know, I will say, if we have 100 projects in our long range plan that are not in the state tenure plan and not in the TIP, right? So there's a lot of projects out there. I score all those projects, but if I don't hear from a community and they've got one project and I haven't heard from them, I don't prioritize that. I don't say, well, that gets 100%, you know, that gets the top score. I get nothing for that because I haven't heard from that town to say that project.
yeah, it's got no support.
Right, so I do look at those kinds of things, and it's not just because they have one project, they get full marks for that. It's
Right, yeah, so Good point, yeah, that's, I had
You know,
thought.
they might get some score for that because it's in long range plan, right, or it's in a, you know, order study or something like that, it's been looked at, identified, but if the town doesn't say to me, this project is a priority for us, then, you know, things get ratcheted back.
Yeah, that's good.
So I think the percent is just being points out of a 100-point scale, so you've got 16, maximum 16 possible points for support.
Right.
And for local, that means
Yeah.
that each of those is about 5 points.
Right.
5 and change, so you could have a glowing letter of support and funding commitment from the municipality. But if it's a project that really doesn't meet a critical need and isn't in any regional plans, they might only end up with 5 or 6 points.
Right, yeah, it could.
So, obviously we did local projects now, but I think when you're looking at this from a regional planning perspective, from a much more global perspective, to look at it at that level, because, the local project may have, from a local perspective, be very important, and I'm not trying to negate that that isn't an issue, but when you're really looking at projects with a 10-year plan and on a statewide basis, looking at it from a much broader perspective, like, so you have 10 communities in the RPC, because I know that's not correct, let's say, but there's like, there's something in the region that's really much more important than from a local perspective, and I think as you go through this process, trying to convey the importance of that in addition to the local projects and the statewide significance. Because as I look at layout, and we just had a discussion on safety here, and this isn't much of a variation, but for local, you have 20, 18, and 19%, which isn't much of a difference, but isn't safety on liberty should be like a top issue on all of those? I'm just using this as for discussion purposes, whether whoever rated this believes that or not, but there's some slight variation, but if safety is the most critical issue when we're looking at transportation issues, shouldn't that be consistent or even giving additional emphasis? I'm just throwing that out for discussion.
No, I think it's good points, and the one thing I'll add to that is, this is essentially gets us to that short list of 15 projects that we debate at this committee in maybe June, at the June meeting, assuming I can get my act together. As to, okay, which of these, and it gives us the top 5 projects in each group, local, regional, interregional, that we say, okay, which of these is important? And yes, you're gonna have projects that are very important at a local level that are irrelevant at the regional level, and we have to have that discussion about what's the priority for the region. And in some cases, it's a mix and match where we say, well, this local project, it's small, we can kind of fit it within our budget. As well as we pick something out of the regional category, if you, having done this for now 4 or 5 cycles, using a similar methodology, we try to pick the projects that seem to make the most sense based on the budget limitations that we had. And sometimes that's the highest priority project, and sometimes it's the projects that will fit within the budget that we have available, which at $8 million for a 10-year plan cycle isn't very much. So, and I think last iteration is where we saw that in effect. Our top priority project was the Portsmouth Circle. DOT said that's way too expensive. You can't fit that within your allocation. So you need to do something different. And so we went with one of the other top priorities, and getting the circle in as a study, an engineering study. So we had to kind of limit what we did there. But we had varying success over the years on that. And it's really the mix of projects that floats to the top once the scoring is done. Sometimes it's very obvious which should be the top priority. Other times it's not so obvious.
Well, I think I like the fact that safety is still the top priority, but I think of almost equal significance is maintaining the infrastructure, and that's and they're related. Let the roads fall apart, the safety is gonna suffer, but safety is, you're gonna get a lot of points, especially for specific projects that exist, like changing to a roundabout from a intersection, but so you do have to maintain infrastructure, and so those should get significant weight.
I'd like to see equity and accessibility go up at the local level, cause the last mile is often at the local level. So I feel like that, in my opinion, should be more important comparatively to.
You know how I would.
Yeah.
Agree with
I think
that.
we're aligned.
I didn't do the survey, so shame on me.
Well,
I could have had an impact.
You could have had an impact, right?
and quite frankly, I kind of had upped that a bit because I was thinking in terms locally of senior transportation, things that not
Yeah.
vehicle related directly. And so I was kind of surprised to get that went down, but you know, as the state ages, that's going to be a significant factor, and I agree. I would like. I'm surprised it went down from being on par with the state of repair.
All right, well, we've got roughly 12 minutes left in this meeting. So I would guess, maybe the next step is if folks have a specific breakdown that they want to propose. It seems like the local scale one is the one that people have the most concern. Of the distribution. Is that or is it more widespread than that?
It's something we have to finish today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
really, yeah.
If we're gonna rate them in June,
I mean,
we need the values.
yeah, because theoretically, the process is, you guys tell me the scores today, I plug it into my spreadsheets and score all the new, you know, after the 5th of June, when all the projects have come in, any new project come in, and score all the projects, come up with that short list of the top 5 in each of these categories, right? And then we talk about it at the June meeting. And then the commission at the July meeting says, yes, go ahead and get estimates for these projects. And then the consultants have basically July, August, and September to do their estimates. We come back to this group in October, or maybe September, late September, either September meeting, October meeting. And then I think September meeting would be ideal. October goes to commission with a final recommendation for our draft priorities for the 10-year plan. And we send it to DOT by the November 15th-ish deadline. So kind of working back from that, the more time we spend debating this, the less time the consultants have essentially to do the job that they need to do. And since that's kind of a critical component, you know, so, yeah.
So I'll throw something out for you, Dave.
All right, thanks.
Equity and accessibility, I increased 14%. Network significance, I dropped by 2%. Natural hazards and resilience, I increased by 2%. What do we got there? Sorry.
What you
Want me to bring up a spreadsheet and do some math? Let me do some math on.
you can pull it.
Maybe.
Yeah, it would probably be productive.
Yeah, sorry, I had it in my head and then I lost it. Hey,
Yeah.
Oh, it worked perfect.
Math in your head is always more of a challenge, especially, you know, when you're under pressure. So, so let me just. All right, so.
Accessibility was up to 14. Network significance, I think goes down to 11.
Yeah, yes, we can.
Mobility,
You said 8, that one? He was going up to, because that's what,
National hazards and resilience went up to 10.
All right,
So support would go down to 9. Yeah,
do you want support down to 9?
I would suggest considering increasing economic development a little bit.
that decreased by 1% from last time.
Yeah, maybe increase 2. And some 3 percentage points to,
it's free, you can add to mobility, when you didn't add. You could,
Mobility dropped by 3%.
yeah, I think when you talk about putting it up 2%.
Yeah, I might have, yeah, we could go higher on safety.
Yeah, you had that as 8.
you could bring support up to 10% instead of 9.
You could, yeah, and you could drop network significance. On a local level.
Yeah.
Did I say that out loud?
Just make 10% and
Yeah.
it'll, a wait a second, yeah, it gives you 2, so.
So you could.
Accessibility,
You can increase.
equity, or are you there?
You could.
That's what. That's
What do we want?
that's not personal, but that's. Not everybody.
Maybe I could, one more to economic development. Make it even 12.
Yeah, we got even numbers.
So we got 1% to play with.
Mobility, yeah.
I'm not saying you necessarily need to put it in mobility. I'm not suggesting anything at this point.
Yeah, it's hard for me to wrap my head around how important that is at the local level.
You think about mobility as being the ability to get from place to place faster.
Yeah.
Throughput.
Through.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
So at the local level, it's definitely less important. Right.
Yeah, compared to. Like Route 33 and going through Adams Stratum, you know.
It's pretty important when you can't get access to the road because of the traffic.
yeah, some communities that may be,
Right.
there may be hotspots, so.
All right, I got a,
Which might contribute to nearly 100% support in my community.
right, but yeah, Route 33, that would be even, yeah, that's more of a, that intersection that you're talking about, that's more of a regional scale, right?
Yeah,
It's a
because-
connection between, right?
Extra reports.
So it's already getting a little bit more consideration there with mobility being a 14% as that. So I had a suggestion to put the 1% into safety,
Yeah,
which for some reason,
Yeah, to go back down to 20 and see what happens.
interesting, okay. Excel back is struggling today too.
Cause the numbers you haven't adjusted are as well.
Oh, you know what it is? Yeah, that's right. So.
this looks more balanced.
Yeah, so there was some not rounding occurring on.
Yeah.
So, okay. So this is the proposal that we have in front of us, basically, for. Let's see, I've got them in a different order, of course, than I do. So 12% for economic development, 14% for equity and accessibility, mobility is at 10%. Natural hazard resiliency is at 10%.
Mobility is only at 8%.
Is it? Oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you. 8%. Network significance is at 10%. Safety at 20%. State of repair at 16% and support at 10%. All right, so that's the one suggested adjustment from what we came up, what was in the draft that was sent out.
I have another suggestion. I suggest we take what was voted on online and accept that.
Okay. All right, so we have two, I guess, competing suggestions. Where, I guess we probably need to do a separate. What do you do?
Was one a motion and then some?
Yeah.
There's no motion yet at this point, so. I guess you,
Second suggestion here is that it's all well and good. I have three voices that have come up with flipping numbers here, and that's how we really do it. I think everyone that looks through it online thought about each of the different criteria, the set of criteria. Other than that, I haven't seen that discussion here deep enough to change what was submitted online on it. If we had the time to do that, we could do that. I think the people that put it online had the time and thought about those things, and it's an average. Otherwise, it's just overly impacted by three individuals that have been flipping numbers.
I get that.
Sorry.
Okay, then, I get a chat, just to see if this is an online comment here. Before we vote.
we,
Okay.
All right, thanks, Lee. Okay, so, all right, we have a couple of suggestions here. I guess the next step would be to put forward a motion. On this, unless there's further discussion. On either.
So basically, we have,
I'll forward a motion to the numbers that we were working on up here.
Okay.
And we can vote it up or down.
All right, sounds good. So we have a motion from Rad on. Adjusting the percentages under the local scale to reflect what we've discussed. Here in the last few minutes and is shown on the spreadsheet there. Okay, is there a second on that?
Second.
Mark, okay. All right, can someone help me on the, how we should do this officially, since we have sort of a competing motion that would be to keep it as.
for one thing, I think you probably want to go back to. Away from the share screen so you can see the people voting online.
Right.
Because they have votes.
Right.
And then you can have people hold up hands or raise their hands.
So David, if he had the motion and he seconded, so you can take a vote on that motion, either pass it or pass it.
And then if we go back, okay,
If I do it.
all right, so I guess we have a motion and a second on. Keeping, I'm gonna just lay it all out there, keeping the interregional and regionals. Distribution percentages as they are, adjusting the local. Scale distribution according to the numbers that we were showing on the screen a few minutes ago. And we have a motion second on that, so I guess I will take a vote, all in favor.
Vote on Rad's motion.
Voting on Rad's motion.
Right, and I would suggest to have the people online, because we don't have visuals on all of them, is use the raise hand function. So
Okay.
you can count raised hands and then.
All right, so those of you online that are interested in voting up or down on this, I guess raise your hand if you're online. And those in the room, all in favor of that, maybe I should do a raise a hand on that as well. Just to make sure that I get everybody correct. So I guess all in favor of the motion on the floor, raise your hands. We got 1, 2, and 3. And get a thumbs up. And Joe raising his hand, so 2, so that's 5 in favor of that. Those, I guess maybe I should do those of you not in favor, maybe raise your hand now. So that I can get an accurate count.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3. 10, 4. Yeah, I recognize that you're brand new to this.
Exactly, I just
Yep.
should abstain from it because I'm not really sure.
You have the right to vote however you want.
Yeah, no, I understand.
All right, so as of this point, we have 5 in favor, 4 against,
I abstain.
and 1 abstention. Okay, so that motion passes. So, okay,
Nice question. So
absolutely.
when you vote, you can't vote online? You do, oh.
Yeah, we have a quorum.
Yeah.
So in the room, so we can do that. Yeah.
So close. So close.
Yeah, so, you know, this is something that we tackle every 2 years, so we'll have another shot at this. And if, you know, we'll try to improve the process for next time, so it's one, not as much of a time crunch. And two, that we have time to work through things like this. A little more detail, so, okay. All right. Let's see, what do we have? We have, oh, it's 2 o'clock, so, we have kind of run out of time. But I will take a moment if there's anybody that has either an important agency or community issue that they need to air out here in the next, let's say, 2 minutes, or announcement that they need to make. I'd like to hear that. Anybody in the room? Kayla?
The survey for the long-term plan is open. I can send out, I've done presentations with the link, but if it's easier for me to just send that out to the whole group via email, I just have to send out to the mailing list, but that's open for 9 more days, and it takes about 5 to 10 minutes. So that is an option, you should definitely fill it out.
How many responses?
275 last time I checked, so we're getting close to 300.
So, yeah, so if you have some time to fill out our long range plan survey, please do that. We'll send out a link sometime today or tomorrow. Okay. To make sure everybody has it. Excuse me, anything else in the room? Any folks online, any issues need to be raised or announcements? Not hearing anything. We're gonna call the meeting to a close. So thanks everybody for coming once again. And we'll see you next month. We'll have a meeting next month and hopefully I won't have you meet over the summer. So we've done 6 meetings in a row. That's a lot.
If I had to miss a meeting, like, because I just gave birth or something, can I send someone as a official, like, alternate that could vote, or is that?